Margarita Pimentel, just to provide a welcome to you all. Just hand to you, Margarita, if we've got you.
Thanks, Laura. I was on mute, talking away. Anyway, look, just a big welcome to everyone joining us today. It's great to see how many people have already joined the webinar, and I think when we checked yesterday, I think we had about 380 people who are registered for today's webinar, so that's fantastic to see that interest. I'm Margarita Pimentel. As Laura indicated, I'm the Group Manager of the Onboarding and Connections Group within AEMO. I do also just want to recognise the fact that Erica Twining, the Manager of the Connections Reform Team, couldn't be here today, but she has been instrumental in actually leading this reform. I guess in the context of AEMO and how we want to work with industry, our aim is to work in partnership with you in your connections, registration and commissioning processes. I'm really just here once again to say thank you for your contribution to enabling what we hope is a step change in the value add services that we can offer to you. I really do want to thank you for lending us your expertise, your learnings and your time, for problem solving this with us in real time, for testing this with us in the real world, and most importantly, for embracing this particular initiative with such open-mindedness and enthusiasm. We already have 6 organisations working through this process with us. We have another 5 who have expressed interest in working with us. And without your support, I think we just wouldn't be here at this session today. So I'm going to hand back across to Laura to take you through this session. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Margarita. Before we start, we just want to have an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, seas and waters across Australia. We honour the wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders, past and present, and embrace future generations. We acknowledge that wherever we work, we do so on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander lands. We pay respect to the world's oldest continuing culture and First Nations people, deep and continuing connection to the country, and hope that our work can benefit both people and country. So throughout the day, or throughout this 1 hour that we have together on the early assessment framework, we will be taking questions through Slido. So you've got the QR code that's available on the screen right now. There's also a number that you can plug in if you're going onto the Slido website. You can use your phone to ask questions, or you can log onto your desktop. We'll be taking questions throughout and then answering them at the end. So we'll take a time for about 15 or so minutes towards the end of this session so we can answer them as best as possible. If there is an opportunity for us to be able to collate questions, we may do that if we have a couple coming through that are quite similar. So please feel free to ask those throughout the session. If we don't get to all the questions, if we've got quite a number coming through, we'll try to be able to provide a written response back to those after. And now we'll just be moving on to our agenda for today. So you can see on our screen that we have a couple of different topics we're going to take you through. So we're going to take you through the introduction of what the early assessment framework is, the background and objectives of what we've tried to achieve throughout the Connections reform initiative and what this work stream has worked to achieve, and then the guideline and the process overview. Then we'll have Brian taking us through the optional package details and then move into our Q&A session. Now, today's objectives, we'll be presenting that early assessment framework guideline. We'll be able to provide you a link as to where that is on the AEMO website, so you can take the time to review it afterwards once we finish the webinar, and then we'll take the time to answer some questions. We have our presenters, Ryan Burl, who's been the lead project manager on the early assessment framework work stream for the Connections Reform Initiative. And then we also have Brian Lee, our principal engineer in our tech solutions team, who'll be able to take you through this presentation. So I'll hand across to you now, Ryan, if you can take us through the introduction and the background and objectives.
Great, thank you, Laura. Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Buell. I'm the project manager for the early assessment framework. I've been working in developing the EAF with Erica over the last couple of years, so I'm pleased to be here today to talk through the program and where we've landed. So, as part of the CRI program, or Connections Reform Initiative program, the EAF was designed to address several key challenges in the connections process. Through industry feedback, we heard 3 consistent challenges with the current connections process: duplication of effort across projects, uncertainty in model assessment outcomes, and uncertainty for developers when selecting OEM partners. So in response to this, the proposed solution was to establish a pathway for OEMs to engage with AEMO earlier, so fundamental model issues can be identified and resolved before a project submission is made. Next slide, please. When we started designing the EAF, we wanted to ensure a highly collaborative approach was taken, one that made the process practical, fit for purpose, and informed by industry experience. The first phase focused on concept development, where workshops and direct industry engagement helped explore the idea and shape the initial design document. Phase 2 moved into co-design of the draft guideline, driven by continued close engagement with OEMs and NSPs. Towards the end of 2025, we commenced assessments with a small number of early adopter OEMs using the approach set out in the draft guideline. Phase 3 focused on pressure testing the draft guideline and processes, with AEMO working closely with OEMs to refine the assessment approach, ultimately resulting in the first EAF certificate being issued a month ago, and the final guideline expected to be published next month. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, what is the EAF and what is it designed to do? The EAF provides a structured pathway for OEMs to engage and collaborate early with AEMO. By undertaking an early assessment, OEMs can confirm their models meet the usability and robustness standards applied in the connections process. This helps create greater confidence in the model quality before those models are relied on in a project environment. We see several potential direct benefits for OEMs. First, it provides early direct engagement with AEMO to identify model issues sooner, helping to reduce rework and delays later in the connections process. It can also reduce barriers and uncertainty for new OEMs and technology by providing earlier visibility of fundamental model or technology issues. It also creates an opportunity for OEMs to brief AEMO and NSPs on new products, building knowledge of the product and associated models, supporting a smoother pathway into future connection projects. Next slide. While the EAF is focused on direct early engagement with OEMs, the benefits flow through to connection applicants, investors, and the broader industry. For connection applicants, one of the key benefits is reduced risk when selecting partner OEMs. Where models have been assessed through the EAF, applicants can have greater confidence in the OEM product and the quality of the supporting models. That can help reduce overall project risk and may also reduce the assessment scope later in the connections process. For investors, by reducing the inherent uncertainty associated with new products, the EAF can support more informed investment decisions by reducing some of that uncertainty. And for industry more broadly, the benefits are about industry-wide efficiency improvements. EAF certified models help remove duplication of assessment effort across multiple individual connection projects, while supporting knowledge sharing of new products and technologies across the sector through structured early engagement. So overall, the EAF is intended to create benefits not just for OEMs, but across the wider connections landscape. Next slide. So as a reminder, the pre-application process launched earlier this year. While both processes support early engagement, they are designed for different purposes and operate at different points in the connection lifecycle. The EAF is aimed at OEMs, whereas pre-application is aimed at connection applicants. The EAF focuses on generic OEM plant models, while pre-application considers project-specific configurations. In terms of assessment focus, the EAF is concerned with confirming model robustness, whereas pre-application looks more broadly at whole of plant compliance. So although both processes are intended to support better project outcomes through earlier engagement, the EAF is narrower in scope and model focused, while pre-application is project specific in focus. Next slide, please. So yep, we'll just go through the guideline and a high level process overview. The EAF guideline provides the overall structure for how the EAF will operate in practice. At a high level, it covers the process assessment methodology and support service packages available through the EAF. We will discuss those a little bit more in detail later on. Next slide, please. At a high level, the process moves through 5 main steps: contracts, receiving data, assessment, issue resolution, and certification. The process begins with contracts being put in place, which establishes the formal basis for the assessment to proceed. Once that is complete, AEMO receives the relevant model data and supporting information required to begin the review. The next step is the assessment itself, where the models are reviewed to determine whether they meet the required usability and robustness standards. If any issues are identified through that assessment, there is a step to work through and resolve those issues with the OEM. Once those issues have been addressed, the process moves to certification, confirming that the models have met the required standards, issuing the certificate, and performing a knowledge sharing webinar with the OEM if they wish to do so. Under a typical assessment, this process is expected to take about 4 months. Next slide, please. A few practical points to note about how the assessment process works. First, the EAF is an optional service for OEMs. It is not a mandatory step in the connections process. Second, the assessments are carried out by a dedicated specialist team with extensive experience in power system modeling and the connections process, which helps ensure OEMs have access to the right expertise. Third, as the process includes sensitive information, AEMO has put in place appropriate protections so that models and supporting documents are not shared outside the specialist team or AEMO systems without prior OEM permission. And finally, the service operates on a fee-for-service basis, with costs recovered through a contractual agreement between the OEM and AEMO. That's it for me. Next slide, please, and I'll hand over to Brian.
Thanks, Ryan. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Lee, Principal Engineers in Technical Solution Teams, has been involved in the development of the EF from a technical aspect. So today I will not take you through the standard EF assessment details, optional scopes, and then talk about the EF certification, which will be the main output of this framework. Next slide, please. So, sorry, go back to the previous one. So for the EF assessment, it's basically structured into 3 components: the documentation checks, model quality checks, and model performance checks. So all of these are based on the PSMG and DMAT requirements. The OEM model will be assessed under a genetic, non-project specific plant configuration. At high level, what we are doing here is mainly to assess the model, whether the OEM model is sufficiently robust and well-defined before it enters to a connection process. So, so the small signal models and menus are not considered so far in the EF. And next slide, please. So starting with the documentation checks. So this is mainly about whether the submitted documentations is sufficient to support model use and also consistent with the model of the plant. So we are looking at the alignment between the product specification and the model capability. And transfer function block diagrams and model menus should include the representative of the plant of the control of the plant. And also the detailed modeling description need to clearly mention in the menu for user to use the model properly. And also we will check the consistency between the menus, PSAC model, PSCAD model, and the parameter mapping sheet. In addition, we're also looking at the evidence that the model response is benchmarked against the actual measured behavior through the test like the factory acceptance test or HEAL test where available, similar to the requirement in the DMAT guideline. And last one, we're also looking at the SCR confirmation letter to confirm what's the OEM's capability of operating at very low SCR. So in addition to this, so if any certain behaviors or limitations are not fully modeled, so they will also need to be documented explicitly so that the limitations can be understood upfront. So now it's about the model quality checks. So this is about assessing the structure and the implementation of the PSAC and PSCAD model. It includes the aggregation methodology, need to follow the approach mentioned in the PSMG. And the PSAC and the PSCAD structure need to be correctly configured and compiled. Executable models need to be uniquely defined and portable so that the model can be used properly and also integrated into the NAM case. Parameters and monitoring signals need to be assessed, and especially some key control parameters need to allow the user to change if needed. Also, we will checking the simulation settings in both models are aligned with the DMAT requirements. And lastly, the critical components need to be explicitly modeled, like the communication delay. So all this part is mainly to focus on ensuring the model is technically sound and usable before we move into the simulation studies. Next. So the third part of the assessment is the model performance check, where we move into the simulation studies. So we will assess the PSAC and PSCAD model dynamic response across various network conditions, operating scenarios, and also the different disturbances to check the model robustness, and also adopting the test results to cross-check some key performance standard, just to ensure the model is not tuned purely for the robustness, but also can maintain appropriate level of performance standards. So this also align a normal tuning process in a connection process. And next, we will also check the consistency between the EMT and RMS model by doing the benchmarking of PSAC and PSCAD results to ensure there's no material divergence between two simulation platforms. Lastly, we will check whether the model capability of maintaining stable operation at very low SCR based on the withstand SCR test in SIG. So as you see there, it is noted that we will work with OEMs to define the plant configuration and the test conditions such as the Pmax SCR ratio range upfront before we move into the EAF to ensure the assessment are representative to OEM's typical project conditions. Next one. So now I will talk about the optional scopes in addition to the standard EAF. Next one, please. So those three optional scopes is addition to the standard EAF assessment depending on OEM's objectives. First one, wide area integration checks is mainly to confirm the OEM model can be successfully integrated into the PSAC OPDMS snapshot and also the PSCAD wide area models. This could help to identify any compatibility issues at the earlier stage. Benchmarking studies. So benchmarking is mainly to confirm the model performance between different versions. And this is particularly useful where an update does not significantly change the dynamic response of the model. In that case, the benchmarking can be performed as part of the EAF, and also the result can be referenced in the connection projects rather than repeating the full benchmarking for every project that transition into the new model versions. And lastly, about knowledge sharing webinar. So this provide the opportunity to share the outcomes and learnings from this assessment to involve connection teams, NSPs, and also connection applicants, subject to OEM's invitation only. So all of these, all of these optional services will be agreed in the development phase of the statement of work before we move into the EAF. Yeah. And next, we will talk about the certification. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the EAF certificate will be issued after a successful assessment against the defined criteria, and the certificate can be considered to reduce the scope associated with the connection assessment. So the certificate will include the product name, version, scope, and the services we performed in this process, and also the assessment outcomes. In addition, we'll also specify what's the detailed plant configuration we assessed and the testing network conditions range like SCR and XR ratio range. And lastly, we'll also record any non-critical issues identified through the process. So the principle and with the explanation of why we consider as a non-critical issues. So there are a couple of principles we're thinking when classify this issue as critical, such as whether the issues will the performance may have a potential to adversely impact the power, the system security, or the quality of supply, or the issue may prevent sufficient information being available from future project-specific studies, and it could be leading to the plant performance below the minimum access standard. It is important to note that the certificate is not a replacement for connection assessment and does not itself satisfy the NER requirement, but it can be used as a supporting evidence in the connection applications process. So the value of the certificate itself, it provides a consistent basis of the model assessment, and also it provides transparency of the assumptions and test, and it can be reusable evidence that support multiple projects. So the EF certificate we provided to OEM is up, so the OEM to use at their discretion. Certificate will be recognized by email connection teams in the projects, and also we will continue to work with NSPs to ensure the EF results will be is recognized. Next one, please. So last part, I will talk about the certificate validity. So the certificate is only valid for specific model versions, plant configurations, and also the network conditions we assessed. There's on the right side, there are a couple of scenarios we are thinking maybe trigger a reassessment, such as any material changes to the model that may address bugs or performance, or any additional functionality or features added to the model, or if the model is to be recognized under different operating modes, plant configurations, and network range. OEMs may choose to recertify for each new version of the model they expect to deploy in the NAM. Alternatively, the OEM and the connection applicants may choose to include this kind of reassessment in the pre-application or application stage. In either case, we are thinking to take a more pragmatic, fit-for-purpose approach for the reassessment to make sure the effort is minimized, and we will also leveraging some previous assessment results. So to wrap up the presentation, so the EF is mainly to design to provide a structured, traceable, and reusable approach for the model assessment, aiming to streamline the connection process. Yeah, that's all from me. I may hand back to Laura.
Yep, great. Thanks so much, Brian. This presentation has been the high-level summary of the Early Assessment Framework Guideline. We have a couple of different actions that we'll follow up following this. So we encourage you to review the guideline. As Ryan mentioned, the final will be published to our website in June of this year. We'll send you an email with the link to the guideline document as it currently is on the website, the presentation, and this webinar recording in case you need to review it again or share with any of your peers. We are also encouraging you to provide us feedback on this webinar. So we always like to grow and continue to make sure that our webinars are worthwhile to industry. So please feel free to provide us with that feedback. The link will be circulated in the chat and also in the email following this session. And if you do have any further questions about this webinar or about the Early Assessment Framework, please feel free to get in contact with us on contact.connections@aemo.com.au. We'll now be moving into the Q&A portion of the webinar. We actually have 30 minutes, so the team has gone through the content in great time. So we've got lots of questions that are coming through. So I think we'll be spending quite a bit of time trying to answer them to the best of our ability. As we mentioned, it's on Slido, so the QR code is on the screen, or you can enter in the code directly into the website. There is a voting function as well, so you can like other questions that are already submitted into Slido, and I highly encourage you to review those questions before sending in another one if it has already been asked by another person on the webinar. We've got a number of our project team and our SMEs that are on this call, so we'll try and answer those to the best of our ability. If we don't have an answer for you at this time, as we mentioned, we can also follow up with this following the session. I will move to the first question that has the most likes as well in our Q&A portion. The first question is, will AEMO publish the list of OEM models that have completed the EAF certification?
Would you like me to do that one, Brian?
Yep.
Sure. Yeah, so the answer is no. We will not publish like a list of certified OEMs on say AEMO's website. Once you do the EAF, you'll be issued a certification or a certificate. This more or less looks like a short report of about kind of half a dozen to a dozen pages. It is up to the OEM then to work with the connection applicant to submit that EAF certificate as part of the connection application, or 539 or something like that.
Right.
And I might just add to that, Ryan. I think at the end of the day, once we actually issue the certification to the OEM has the ability to share that certification with essentially anyone that it wants to. And so it has the ability to advise developers that it has received that certification, provide evidence of that certification, and do the same with NSPs and investors. And in terms of, I think the key thing we're really conscious of is just privacy and confidentiality requirements that sit around these models that we're working with. So if we were to contemplate publishing a list in future, we would need to be consulting with those OEMs and making sure that they're providing us with their permission to actually do that. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ryan and Margarita. Our next question is about the certification. So once a certification is issued to an OEM, what tangible benefits would this provide to the project? For example, would projects using that certified model experience a shorter timeline for NSPs or AEMO and the assessment?
Yeah, maybe I can take that one first. I think the first is the study. The main benefit includes the study efforts and cost reduction in the connection process. First, it's difficult to quantify. So the EF is mainly focused on the risk reduction, but however, there are also some effort and cost savings can realize from first is the reduction in EMO and NSP's query, and while conducting the EF, EMO will log any potential model-specific queries as non-critical issues that EMO and NSP can ask the report to share the knowledge upfront. So there will be less questions and less timeline in the DD process. And also the most non-project specific model checks in the DMAT can be reduced. That one I'm mainly referring to the minimum mandatory DMAT test. That is the table 2022 in the DMAT guideline. Can be acknowledged by using the EF certificate.
Thank you, Brian. Next question, how much reliance will NSP and AEMO place on the EAF certification during project-specific GPS assessment?
So this is like a similar answer to that one. It's mainly we currently accept once the OEM model has been certified by EF, then minimum mandatory DMAT test can be applied in the project connection process.
And I think the intention is that we wouldn't be looking to repeat any of the work that we've undertaken as part of the certification. We wouldn't be looking to repeat that in the project itself.
Great. We've got a couple of questions coming through regarding what model changes invalidate a certificate. So for example, software versions such as PSSE version 34, version 36, PBC firmware versions, project configurations such as hybrid solar only, and how would this be addressed and any updates that are occurring in these areas? And will there be required rework or a minimum scope that's applied to these model variations?
Yeah, sure. I think the reassessment, like similar what I mentioned previously, is we will identify like what. So we will work with OEM first to see what the update is. Like I think the examples in that question include three different parts. Like first is about the PSSE merge transitioning. So that one we will align with what we are applying in the connection process as well. Like if we're assessing PSSE 34, then we will need some benchmarking at least for the 36. And for the PCC firmware update, so that is dependent on what the update is. If there's nothing changed to the control dynamics, then yeah, we are likely to just do a quick minimum benchmarking to verify that claim from the OEM, and it will be a minimized reassessment process as well, a fast track pass. And the last part about the hybrid. So the hybrid itself, it is more how could I say, it is more like broad. We need to take it careful as well, because the hybrid plant configuration, the approach is highly depending on the configuration is standard or is project specific. If it is project specific, it's more likely to assess in the pre-application or application stage. And in the EF, we prefer our standard hybrid configuration to assess it.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Does the EAF apply to grid forming BESS models, hybrid PPCs, DC couple systems, and plant controllers, or only individual OEM unit models?
Yeah, we are assessing a genetic plant model similar to connection projects, including both PPC and the inverter level. So and also including the balance of plant parameters like transformers, regulation cables. Those are will be discussed and agreed with OEM to better to represent what their typical project plant configuration.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Now we have some questions here. So can AIMA provide a guidance on the cost for the EAF?
Ryan, you want to take?
Yeah, I would probably just, I don't know, Margaret, I don't know if you want to.
Um, I think so. So the intention is that if you come to us with interest in undertaking one of these assessments, what we would probably do is sit down with you and work through a scope of what that looks like, and then we would actually provide you with a cost estimate at that point in time. So you have the choice to either proceed or not proceed. That's completely up to you. But essentially, that's and the only reason that I'm suggesting that is because they can actually, those assessments can differ depending on what optional packages you might pick up in the context of the work package itself and the scope that you want covered.
Yep.
Great, thank you, Margarita. Will models used in projects that have passed the connection process in the past be granted auto EAF certificates?
Is that, maybe I'll start that, Brian, is that we do, yeah, within the EAF guideline, we do discuss a kind of a mature model EAF pathway, where there would just be a kind of a fairly minimal EAF assessment performed on kind of mature models, or models that have progressed through connection projects. So it will be a reduced scope, but it won't be a kind of automatic kind of rubber stamp type of setup. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. In what ways will a GPS assessment with the EAF certified model be less onerous than a GPS assessment with a model that doesn't have an EAF certificate?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think the intention of the EF is not for project specific like GPS studies. It's mainly to reduce the burden of non-project specific studies. So for each project, you can focus on the GPS studies. You don't have to spend too much time on the DMAT studies. So yeah, that's the answer.
Are all NSP providers aligned and fully on board with the current connections process? Is AEMO planning to publish or standardize a reference plant configuration that will be used for assessment purposes?
So I can start that. So yeah, we have been talking to NSPs. There are a few of them that are kind of quite vocal in recognizing it. But it's very much a kind of ongoing process, because the EAF is relatively new. I'll just kind of acknowledge that will be a bit of a learning curve there, but we're fully committed to working with NSPs to make sure they are happy with the EA certificate, and then adopting any changes over time that are going to get kind of more buy-in there. I think to the second point about the configuration, the plant configuration, we do have a kind of a reference or an example plant configuration in the guideline, but we are very conscious that we want the configuration to be as close to the OEM's target projects as possible. So we really want to emphasize that we want to work closely with OEMs to modify that plant configuration to make sure it's appropriate for their situation.
Thanks, Ryan. Margarita, we have a question here for you. So why is the EAF related model certification not performed by independent accredited certification bodies, but instead by AEMO?
That is a good question, and it was something that was I think was touched on during the co-design process that we went through with industry. I think the key thing was really just around sensitivity of intellectual property and just wanting to make sure that OEMs felt confident with the process that was being undertaken and the fact that we would be held to our requirements, our confidentiality requirements under the rules. So that was one key aspect of that. But I guess the other thing is that we really wanted to get it up and running and just test it and see how much support it would receive or how much value it would be able to provide to industry. Once it's up and running, there's no reason why we can't re-look at that at another point in time. We certainly wouldn't have an issue with that. So I might just leave that there.
Great, thanks, Margarita. We have a question here about if they have a certificate, do they need to redo the DMAT at R0?
So it is not actually redo the DMAT, because like even the model used in the project could be different than the model we assessed in the EF, but still we acknowledge those non-project specific tests. So you will with the certificate you can still reduce the assessment effort in the DMAT itself by only doing the minimum mandatory test list.
We have a question from a power plant controller provider. They'd like to do an EAF for their PPC. In their case, which inverter models can they use? Can they use a generic inverter model during this EAF assessment?
So we accept on the multiple OEMs model assessment, but still we encourage the OEMs to discuss with other inverter OEMs to be assessed together in the EF. And you probably select which OEM you probably work more closely in the projects to represent any future projects for your PPC.
I think we've had this question potentially answered a little bit earlier, but the EAF guideline currently only discusses assessment of the PSCAD and the PSSE, and assessment of small signal models manuals have been considered as a part of the EAF.
Yeah, I think I answered that previously. It's mainly so far we are not considering that, and also the small signal models. If you're referring to the asset, then we're currently not considering that in the EF, but we probably consider other part like frequency scanning to assess the small signal model stability in the future.
And just noting that we are, as an organisation, working through working through alternative methods for actually assessing small signal stability, to understand how that might what might impose the least burden on industry. And so we're still working through that process. If you've got any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us.
The connection process is led by the NSP. How can we be assured that AEMO's EAF certification will streamline the connections assessment during the connection application? Will the NSP recognise and accept the EAF findings?
I might,
Sorry, Margaret. Yep. Yeah, go for it, Margaret. Yep.
I'll give it a go, Ryan, and then you can fill in any gaps. But
No worries.
essentially, I think it's probably worth recognising that the EAF guidelines were actually co-designed across industry, and so we did actually have quite a heavy involvement from OEMs, but also from NSPs as well in our co-design process. We are when we work through an early assessment framework an EAF assessment, I'll call it. The intention would be that we would socialise that with network service providers, and I think we've got a provision, or we talk about in the EAF guideline, we talk about actually having lessons learned sessions with network service providers and the OEMs and AEMO together to actually share the learnings from that early assessment as well. Ryan, feel free to jump in at all if you want.
Great, we'll move on to the next question. So for large plants with multiple OEM components, inverters, PPCs, STATCOM, SYNCON, how is the EAF certificate issued? On an individual OEM basis or based on the integrated performance of the entire plant?
The assessment will based on the entire plant, including at least the inverter and the PPC. As for the STATCOM or SYNCON, we suggest not to include any specific equipment. However, if you're thinking your project, if your product is always combined with the STATCOM or SYNCONs in your projects, then if that is representative of TPO configuration, then we can consider to include those additional reactive power support device to assess the entire plant together.
Yeah, and maybe just extending on that, Brian, is that if you are in a situation where you're that there is a large plant configuration with multiple OEMs and things like STATCOMs and SYNCONs, I'd probably be asking yourself if this is a repeatable standard configuration. If it's not, then maybe the pre-application pathway is most appropriate for that particular situation. Yep, that's all.
Great. Since the EAF certificates are tied to a specific model version, how does AEMO avoid repeated assessments when OEMs update models? What defines a material model change that requires reassessment versus minor updates?
So first, I think we encourage OEM to provide any change log first to explain what has been changed in the new model versions, and also provides a minimum test result for us to see what the benchmark look like, and then we can define the scopes according to the change of the model versions. In principle, it is mainly we are more concerning about whether the change have an impact to the performance at the connection point. And if the change has a major impact, then we will need a more thorough assessment. If not, then we will consider the minimum assessment to issue you to recertify the EF certificate in a quicker way.
Thank you, Brian. Are there probity risks for the same engineer works on multiple OEM models? If so, how are controls applied to ensure no cross-use of proprietary knowledge and protect each OEM's IP from unintended disclosure?
So
I can have.
Oh.
Sorry, go on, Margaret. Yep.
I might have a go at answering, and then Ryan, once again, feel free to jump in. I think the key here is that so we have very strict obligations under the National Electricity Law and rules around protecting protected protected information, which intellectual property from an OEM falls under that category, and so we do have strict rules in place around who can actually access any intellectual property from OEMs. And I think the other thing that I would say is we also have a data and model management guideline that outlines the controls that we have in place. That's up on our website, I believe, and I think there may have been a link that was provided in the presentation pack as well.
I just probably add on top of that the actual EAF assessments are only performed by the specialist team. For those that are familiar with onboarding and connection structure, it's the technical solutions team. So all the data is stored in a location only that team has access to, and we don't freely share it across AM. The organisation. That's all. Thanks.
Great. I think we've only got time for a couple more questions, or however, we do have quite a number still live on our Slido, so we may have to commit to providing some answers following this session. But the next voted question would be, how are the different operating scenarios, WRT hybrid plants, how are they going to be accommodated in the process? Is the certificate going to cover all possible operating models such as BESS only, hybrid, WFPV only?
So first we need to treat it case by case, since the hybrid itself may cover different configuration like DC coupled or AC coupled, and the operating scenarios could be operating like the BESS alone, solar farm alone. So we will work with the OEM to understand what will be the typical operating scenarios, and we will assess it for that. And also, if the BESS only, solar farm only, and the combined are intended to will be representative configuration, then we will include in the assessment and reflect in the certificate as well to be used for both all possible scenarios.
Thank you, Brian. And the EAF validity period, how long does the EAF certificate be valid for?
This is not banned with the timeline. My understanding is it's banned on the model versions, and we expect the same model versions assessed in the EF will be same in the projects.
For EAF model submissions, does AEMO provide or support a generic reference model that OEMs can use as a baseline and then customize with their UDM models?
I think this referring to a generic model instead of the OEM its own model? I think that's the question.
I think that's how I understood it, Brian, as well.
Yeah, then probably not, because if it is not an OEM specific model, then we couldn't assess the accuracy and also all the corresponding robustness of the model itself, and we couldn't issue certificate and give the confidence when this model move into the project. Yeah.
Right. And I think we'll just have time for one more question. We have one more question here is, does AEMO require an unencrypted version of the model, or should the black box model be sufficient?
Yeah, a black box model is sufficient, same as the connection process.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Now, as I acknowledged, I think we have several other questions that we haven't been able to get to today, but we've had 30 minutes of great Q&A, and thank you so much for providing all these questions throughout the session. What we'll do is we'll take the remaining questions, we'll collate those where there are some consistent themes in those questions, and provide a response back to those who have attended this webinar today. But we'd just like to thank you all for attending the early assessment framework. As we've mentioned, if you do have further questions or you'd like to get in touch with AEMO about commencing an early assessment framework, please email us on contact.connections@aemo.com.au. You will receive the email and a request for the survey following this webinar, so you can always reply to that as well if you'd like to be to commence the discussion. Again, thank you very much for your participation in the CRI initiatives. We really appreciate your feedback and co-design throughout this process. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.